now we can get into talking about control flow. So far in this class, all of the code that you've written, Python has executed line by line, every single line in order. So this code would take in the number of students, it'll print that's a lot, regardless of the number of students you tell it, and then it'll print, you said there are X, num students. Control flow is this new concept, and it's what we call the types of constructs in a programming language that allow us to control the flow of execution in our code, and hence control flow. You'll also notice I say programming language. I say that specifically to point out that this isn't Python specific. This is a concept that applies to all languages and whatever else you pick up. Might look a little different in other languages, but the idea is they're just the same. And so it's useful for cases where we look at some code or we're writing some code and we think, I don't always want to execute this line, or I only want to do this sometimes. If the reason you don't always want to execute a line of code is because you never want it to run, then it just shouldn't be there. You should delete it. But most of the time, you have some particular condition in which you'd like to run that code. And if that condition is met, it should be executed. If not, it shouldn't. So for example, here, what if we only want to print that's a lot if the user gives us a large number of students? Right now, regardless of how many students you give as input, whether it's 1 or 10 or 15 or 100 or 150 or 300, we always say that's a lot, but it's not always a lot. So if we want to be a little more honest, this is where control flow comes in. And in Python, control flow is conditionals, so if, else, and loops, while loops and for loops. And today we're focused on the conditionals part. Loops are going to come next week. Loops also are interesting and will open new kinds of problems that we can solve, but conditionals are going to do a lot for us, and so we're going to start there. How do we write conditionals and how do we use them? Well, two terms you're going to see me using, or hear me using. One is conditional. I've already used that term. Conditional is what we call a control structure to run a code block only if a certain condition is met. And then here I use the word condition to mean a condition is any expression that evaluates to true or false that we use in a conditional statement. So now get ready, you're about to see your first conditional in Python. There it is. So this is what a conditional looks like. This whole block is a conditional. It uses this keyword if, which is a reserved keyword that Python uses only for conditionals. And the way we build a conditional is if, then a space, then a condition, which is any expression that evaluates it true or false, whether it's just a variable or some bigger expression that needs to be evaluated, followed by a colon. And then after the colon, indented lines, which are what gets executed if the condition evaluates to true. And if the condition doesn't evaluate to true, then all of those lines get skipped and Python goes on and continues. So let's try using that. Going back to our example, we wanted to only print that's a lot if the user gives a large amount of students. How would we do that? Think about it for a couple seconds. Okay, we just learned these conditionals, this if statement. So let's use it. You can use this conditional if, then space, then the condition we want to check, which is num students greater than 100. Sanity check, by the way, is this an expression? Yes. Does this expression evaluate to a Boolean? Yes, because greater than is an operator, a Boolean logic operator, where it compares the two operands and returns true if the left operand is bigger than the right operand. Here, if num students is greater than 100, then the body here is print that's a lot. And so all of these lines that are indented immediately after the condition are part of the conditional. Those are the lines that will only be executed if the condition is true. And we use indentation to tell Python what's part of the conditional and what isn't. And I say lines here because it doesn't have to be just one line, it can be multiple lines. as long as every subsequent line is indented, those are a part of the conditional, of the body of the conditional, or sometimes we also call it a block, the if block or the body of the conditional, the if statement. But you'll notice here at the very last line, we want to run that line every time, regardless of how many students you tell us. We want to tell you what number you gave us. And so as soon as the lines go back to regular indentation, they're no longer part of the conditional. They get executed every single time. So let's take this code and run it and see what it does. My REPL. So if I run my code with Python 3, oops, not 3, main.py, how many students? First, let's try small numbers. So let's say we have only 25 students. Then we only print out, you said there are 25 students, because that isn't part of the conditional. It's not indented anymore. And so Python knows it's not part of the body of the conditional. Whereas if I run this code again and give a larger number, like 175, actually, let's say 195, which is how many students we have in the class now, we're going to print out, wow, more than 100. That's a lot. And we still print out, you said there are 195 students, because that gets printed every time. But these two lines, line 3 and 4, got executed because the condition, num students greater than 100, was true.